Marilyn Hemingway, and welcome to A Gathering Place. I said, I'm stepping back because we have young voices who want to be heard and they're moving on something.
Branding is really important to you and your business.
Even a basic type of technology, you learn it all.
And people are
Good question. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Gathering Place. Today's topic is politics and beyond, or beyond politics. This is our third Sunday when we get together and we talk politics because politics connects everything. The economy, education, voting, civil rights, social justice, everything that we do is impacted by politics. So my good friends, Brandon Upson and Jamarr Brown, are joining us today. And hello, Brandon. How are you?
I'm great, Marilyn. How you doing? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing good. Thank you very much, y'all. We already been talking, before we got on the show. So we got a lot to talk about, and let's bring in Jamarr Brown. Hey, Jamarr.
Hey, Marilyn. Hey, Brandon. How y'all doing?
Hey, Jamar. Good. Hey,
We're
I'm
doing
looking
good.
forward to the third Sunday.
I know.
I know, me too. So we could talk politics and cut up a little bit too, y'all.
Very good.
All right. I think one thing we've learned is it's serious, but you can't take it too serious. We all got lives, folks, but we got to talk politics because it impacts everything we do. We got some good topics today, folks, and before we even came on, we were talking voting. So let's talk voting to get it all kicked off. We are in the midst of Get Out the Vote. So, Brandon, you've got Amplify Action. Tell us what you guys are doing with Get Out the Vote and remind everyone what your mission is.
Yeah, so, our mission with Amplify Action is to rebuild political power within marginalized communities across the South through the civic education and voter mobilization of Black men. We see with all of our research in places where Black men participate at the same rate as Black women, the amount of upward mobility for those areas increase, right? So in rebuilding power, you got to vote. That is your voice. That is your number one tool to make this happen. So over the last couple months since June, we registered over 30,000 Black voters across our targeted states. And now we're working very hard to mobilize 250,000 Black men to the polls using phone calls, text messages, everything and anything we possibly can to do it. We have some teams knocking on doors in Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina. So we are doing the work. There's a lot of, and we're used to seeing this, all of us on this panel here, where the campaigns wait to the very last minute to say, oh, we got to talk to Black folks. So let's go ahead and scrape together some coins and give it to some folks.
Give it our best shot, right?
Yeah. Our last minute Hail Mary throw. So, when we lose on election day, we say the Black people didn't get out and vote. And y'all, let me just say I'm so done with this. Like, it's a cycle that happens every election, and we need to change it. We absolutely need to change it. And I'll stop right there before I go too far.
I can't let you go by saying that, but I'm going to let Jamarr jump in and update us on what he's doing, Get Out the Vote. And your organization, Jamarr, is Repower. Correct me if I'm wrong. So remind us the mission, your role, and what you guys are doing with Get Out the Vote. Then I'm going to come back to Brandon because he left that hanging, and I cannot let him get away with that.
We hanging pads now. That's how we get in trouble. Hi, everybody. Good to be back. I love the third Sunday, so I always look forward to this outside of communion. And, my name is Jamarr Brown. I serve as the Director of Electoral Programs at an organization called Repower. We are a progressive national training and capacity building organization. And really what I've been working on is building out the electoral and campaign training program that we have. And so we just finished a 4-week intro to digital organizing course because we knew that we had to make a pivot in the midst of this COVID-19, that a lot of our voter contact had to go virtual, right? That we had to do more phone calls, more text messages, instead of knocking on doors or having large scale events. And so we have been working with national progressive organizations on doing that. So we did a 6-week intro to digital organizing course in August, September, and then we just wrapped up another 4-week course, getting folks ready for GOTV. And then we just also launched a advanced leadership for women of color who work in politics. And so we are training 60 women of color who serve as either campaign managers, who serve as department heads, even executive directors, on not just looking at this work as getting to November 3rd, but what does it mean after November 3rd? How do we make sure that we protect the vote and that votes are counted? How do we hopefully look towards some kind of transfer of power? And what that means on the federal and also the state levels. And so that's what I've been working on in my job that gives me a check. And then outside of that, I always support Brandon and everything he does whenever he calls. But I serve as a member of the Democratic National Committee, and we just met, over 400 of us just met last week to talk about voter protection. And there's a website, iwillvote.com, that folks should use. You can request your absentee or early mail-in ballot. You can look up your polling location. They even now have that the DNC is actually giving prepaid envelopes. So there's not an economic barrier to ensuring that people actually get their ballot, but also are able to turn it in. We know that this election is pivotal because not only is it a presidential election, but everything we know and believe is on the ballot. And who wins and doesn't win can be very consequential for our futures. And so that's what we're working on. I just finished with the Black Austin Democrats. We just sent 30,000 Black households. We just sent a mail piece. We did a slate card for that. And this weekend, we did a couple contactless lit drops and sign giveaways. And we're doing text banking and all that good stuff. So I'm usually in and out of the Zoom meetings, going to greet people. So thankful that people all across the country are really rolling up their sleeves, for lack of better words, and really getting the word out about voting. So looking forward to the conversation, and hopefully folks out there will ask us some good questions.
Yep, very good. I put it out there, y'all. Drop your questions and your comments right in the comment box, and we will try to get to as many as possible today. So I'm going to put this, let me go back to Brandon, since he brought it up with the pattern of late investment in the Black community. And, Jamar's on the DNC. So shouldn't you be talking to Jamarr about this? Shouldn't you not have been talking to Jamarr about this?
Well, I won yesterday, okay?
I've really been talking to anyone who would listen because, we've all been doing this electoral politicking thing for at least a decade, right? And what we see typically is the election. Somebody will announce that they're going to run a year before the election. The election will go on, right? Things will be done, meaning investments in communities. The numbers and pathway to victory will be laid out. Staff will be hired. In many cases, that staff doesn't look like anyone on this panel. And when I say staff, I mean senior staff and people who have the autonomy and authority to make key strategic decisions on that. And then dollars will be spent to get the candidate closest to victory. But unfortunately, what we see over and over again is 2 weeks before the election, 3 weeks before the election, an aha moment, an epiphany happens within the leadership of the community and say, wait, we need to invest more in the Black community to get this vote out because we need to drum up our base. And my thinking is, and Jamarr says this all the time, your base gets you to the finish line, right? But it's those other votes that get you through. And if you're going into October, November, and you don't have your base solidified, what in the world are you doing?
Yeah,
and come to people at the last minute to ask them to save the day and then turn around when you don't achieve the thing that you were running all year to achieve and say that they're the reason that you didn't do it. In 2016, We talk about black men not showing up to the polls at the same rate as black women or black people, period, not showing up to vote for Hillary Clinton at the same rate that they did in 2012 and 2008 for President Obama. But what they didn't talk about was the majority of white women who voted for Donald Trump and
Mm-hmm.
not Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the day after election they went and marched into the streets by the hundreds of thousands doesn't negate the fact that they voted this man into office. So what I want to do right now, as we're going into GOTV, is making sure we are holding folks accountable to not just our community, but to their own personal choices in the ballot. Are we going to give Donald Trump another 4 years? And when I say we, I'm talking to my good friends, white women of America who vote. Are we going to do it again? Because we need you to vote the right way this time. And I refuse to allow my community of Black informed voters to be the scapegoat for when things don't go right.
I agree with you on that one, Brandon. I know as a black female, we're voting. We're going to get out and we're going to vote. Um, my concern, I'm going to throw this up though. Do you think the efforts by Stacey Abrams, for example, have they made any difference?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you look at what's happening with voter protection across the country, she is leading the charge on that. We have and I'm right here in South Carolina, we have the largest voter protection unit that we've ever had in the history of our state in democratic politics. And it's because of her investment, her vision, and her understanding of how the vote is impacted by these silly little tricks that happen every election cycle. So she's trained people, she's paid people, and she's deployed people so that we can make sure that the vote, everyone has equal access to the polls. Now, in addition to that, there have been large scale investments into these campaigns. And we can talk about the campaign in South Carolina that's getting a lot of attention. Jamie Harrison just raised more money than any senatorial candidate in recent history, or period. He's cleared $80 million.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might hit $100 million before the end of this. And my fear is, as a person who's developed organizations to invest in Southern states that normally don't get the investment of other Southern states like North Carolina and Florida, who've been deemed flippable or, high propensity voting areas, purple states, that if Jamie doesn't succeed, these democratic, progressive, like-minded donors across this country are going to believe that an investment in places like South Carolina is a bad investment to make. And I'm fearful that if that happens, we will continue to fight to just get enough to make it and build the foundation to turn out the vote, and not getting the investment to grow our base and turn this state into what it really is, not a ruby red state, but a truly purple state.
I actually have to agree with you on that, and I want to add to that is I think that pattern has already manifested itself in previous races.
Mhm.
Um, but the bigger thing is because the money is so large this time that it's going to be a bigger impact with those investors. If he can't get elected with this amount of money,
Mhm.
then what is it worth it? Where before they never did put the money in. And
Right.
as you say, they put it in at the last minute and it was just enough so they could maybe solve their conscience that, oh, we made an investment, but did they make a real investment? And
Right.
another thing, if Jamie loses, it's not only about the impact on the investment part is folks who are going to look at Jamie and say, if he could not win with all that money, why should I run?
And
When going towards in the future, you should be running. We need more
absolutely.
people to run, and it's going
But
to impact that.
but
Hmm.
we also, and I'm going to let Jamar talk because I talked too much already. But but we also that money has to continue so we can expand our base because we still have a certain population of of people who consider themselves Democrats, but they're actually Dixiecrats, and they will vote for a white Republican before they vote for a black Democrat. So we have the numbers to outpace them. We just need the investment so that we can build the infrastructure to do it on a regular basis.
That's true, and I think Jamar, that's part of what your organization is doing. And if just tie it in and take it forward here, because this is a topic you wanted to talk about today. So go ahead and roll with it, Jamar.
Sure. Well, one of the things I want to add, because you all talked about, not only the investments that would go into places like South Carolina or Texas or, other southern states, or people running for office. Let's talk about the voters, right? That if Jamie gets up there with all these resources and Jamie happens to not win, I think that's something that's important. And so, it's the voters who may feel like their vote doesn't count. Yeah. We've got to be careful about how we do some of this. But, I want to speak about something that Brandon has said when we talked about investments in key areas. And that's something we talk a lot about at Repower is, in our strategic planning, we're trying to figure out, do we go to the Californias where we know everybody's progressive, or do you go to the South Carolinas, the Alabamas, the Mississippis, the Texases, right? And a lot of national organizations are really being challenged to really make those decisions. And I'm glad to see that we are engaging in that type of conversation, because that's something that's really critical. Because what we're doing is we're pinning everything on the election. And what we have to understand is the election is just the beginning, right? It's one thing to get someone elected. It's another thing for them to actually govern, right? For us to still be showing up and participating. And so what we've got to start doing, especially amongst Black voters, is creating a behavior of consistent democratic, and I mean democratic as in democracy, participation. Because one of the things that's important is we show up to the election and then we don't go to the school board meetings. We don't go to the school meetings. We don't call up our members. And so what I've told people, I spoke on a panel to Black faculty at University of Texas. And what I shared with them was, accountability isn't just for the person you vote against. Accountability is also for the people you all are going to the polls and voting for.
That's right.
We've got to do that, because we tend to hold people accountable that we don't like. So if Lindsey Graham, I'm crossing my fingers, he does not win again. But that's just me. But if he happens to win again, right, we've got to hold him accountable. If Jamie wins, we have to hold him accountable too.
That's right.
And that's to some of those things, because Jamie's got to go work with 99 other people to get legislation passed, right? It's not just electing Jamie. It's about supporting Jamie and making sure that he's able to navigate the U.S. Senate to bring more resources, bring dollars, bring legislation and policy back home to South Carolina. And so we've got to start looking at multi-year, multi-cycle investments. And that's one of the things that, I've done in this work here in Texas is I started at Planned Parenthood in 2014. In 2020, we're talking about flipping the House. That means we can redraw the lines to make fairer districts. That means we can pass criminal justice reform, whereas our governor is running defund the police ads against all the Democrats, right? And so really being able to look at what that policy looks like. And what it means is that even if South Carolina goes blue, it's still the investment that has to happen November 4th, right? December 4th, January 4th, right? And so we've got to start teaching people about that consistent multi-year investment. And I think that adds to what Brandon was saying, is that when September, October, November comes, then you're not just tossing millions of dollars into a race that now is somehow winnable. It's that you've already been on the ground. More people are likely to come out and vote and participate because they trust you and they've built a relationship. And those relationships are very valuable. And sometimes these national organizations and these big donors don't think about that.
Right. They don't. And when people hear the word investment, they think money, but it's more than money. The investment must be in education. Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons I started the Gullah Geechee Leadership Institute, was to advocate for leadership that will create positive policies and issues impacting the Gullah community. It's about policies and issues, and we got to educate people. I was at an event last night where on the surface, it had nothing to do with politics, but it had everything to do with politics. It was about sustainable farming, regenerative farming. And food is revolutionary. Growing your own food is revolutionary. And to get to that point where we have regenerative farming, for example, on a larger scale, you have to change policies. You have to change the issues. That means you just don't vote. That means you have to show up to the county council meeting. You have to show up to the city council meeting. You have to show up to the planning commission meeting because of zoning issues. So it's beyond. So when we talk beyond voting, when we talk investment, it's not just money in a campaign. It has to be money on the ground 365, 24/7, so we can educate people on how government runs, how it actually works, and how to change policies so that they impact in a good way the majority of the people. You will never create a law that will benefit 100% of the people. You most certainly hope that you will create a policy or an issue or a law that will benefit the majority of the people. And I'm going to put it out there that a lot of us do not understand that.
Right.
And because we don't understand it, that's why we get these last minute folks popping up going, I talked to the president or the president advisor, and y'all know where I'm going with this. And, and I got a plan. I got a plan, and we're going to change the world. And it doesn't work that way because you're just one person. Do you have an infrastructure behind you to put the pressure on elected officials so that they're held accountable? It has to be beyond having a meeting in the moment, and it has to conclude voting. It has to be a strategy. It has to be almost like a business plan,
Absolutely.
And I see that. I want to break it down two ways. How do we do that? We talk about investment, but how do we really put that infrastructure in place to educate folks? We already are doing part of it. We all are part of organizations that are doing that, but how do we scale it up? It's what I guess I'm asking. And also, I have two black males with me today, so I'm going to have that question out there. We already talked about this a little bit. How do we engage black males so that it's beyond getting them registered to vote, beyond getting them to vote, but they are actually engaged in government and civics? And Brandon, we'll go back to you. What are your thoughts regarding that?
I want to bring up a story that will spark a memory for Jamarr. When I'm not going to say where I was a official and what group I was an official in, but at the time I was one of the youngest officials on this exec board. And that's when I was I just got into politics and everything. And Jamarr, my big brother who's younger than me, as my mentor, showing me the ropes. And we used to always talk about creating long-term strategic plans. And being a business major at the College of Charleston, I was doing leadership visions, planning, long-term strategic advancement plans and all this other good stuff. And we brought this to this organization that I was on the executive committee for, the idea to create a long-term strategic plan for where we were going and what we wanted to achieve, and have some short-term achievable goals and benchmarks. And the next meeting after we presented that, they came back and said, well, we have a calendar. Why do we need to make a strategic plan? Everything we need is on this calendar already. And I almost fell out my chair. And I still look back on that and look at that organization and where they did not go. And I know it was for a lack of vision and a lack of planning. So I always use that story as an example for the work that I'm doing. I know that we all have issues. Our community have really big issues. And now there are new seats brought to the table for us to advocate for those issues. But the thing is, we can talk about these issues, we can put them on the table, but unless those issues become policy, it is all for nothing. It is all for show. And the only way we're going to put our issues into policy is if we have a plan to push this forward, to advocate for people to get into office, to hold them accountable, because we have to hold whoever the next president, whoever the next U.S. senator, whoever the next mayor of our town is, we have to hold them accountable for doing the things that we need them to do to bring solutions to the issues that we face today. So, and I know Jamarr has a lot more that he can say about this, but I just want to bring up that story about the calendar versus the strategic plan. then he would have.
Jamar knows a lot about putting strategic plans together, man. Look, he's waiting. Go ahead, Jamar.
When Brandon was telling the story, I was like, oh, I remember it vividly. I would say it, but people on social media are messy, so we're not even. And so, but one of the things, I'm a Christian, so and I respect Marilyn that you have followers that may practice, other faiths, but for me, I grew up with the scripture that where there's no vision, the people perish. What we have seen is decades of lack of vision, like Brandon was saying, decades of lack of planning. Because back to where you were saying, Marilyn, when we were talking about the investment, where I'll use redistricting as an example, right? Where redistricting we know happens every 10 years, or the census. We just finished the census last week. Happens every 10 years. We don't get to think about just tomorrow or next week or next month. We have to think about the next 10 years. Because when we go back to state legislatures in 2021 and those lines are redrawn, we're stuck with those lines until 2031. And so decisions that we don't make or plans that we don't develop today, we're stuck with for the next 10, 11 years, right? And these are our children that are coming up. These are new people that are getting involved in the process who are now kind of stuck in areas based on what we did or did not do. And so that's what we've got to start thinking about when we're thinking about strategic planning. Also, I want to add to what Brandon was saying, it's not just about your timeline, it's about a goal. What are you trying to achieve? What's your theory of change? What's your vision? And then what are the tactics that you're going to use? Because that's what investors and funders and big donors, that's what they look for, right? So we've got to be conscious and we've got to be mindful of that in this work, because, ultimately at the end of the day, if you don't have a plan, then you must plan to fail. But it's not just you as an individual. A lot of us, like I'm on the DNC, Brandon runs Amplify Action, right? Marilyn, you run the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. If we fail, people that are depending on us or that are relying on us and that we are engaging also fail, not by any fault of their own.
Right.
We can't set ourselves up for failure from day one. And so we've got to do that planning. And that's why I joined Repower to help do the strategic training. We just rolled out a new curriculum on strategic planning that I'm looking forward to testing in February. When we get, I get a little bit of rest after the election. And we're really going to be teaching people, right? What are the variables you need to be looking at? What are the outside factors you need to be looking at? What are the opportunities that you have? What are the threats even that you have? And so we'll be, doing a lot more of that work. So stay tuned for that.
What you just said, Jamar, it speaks to also our government. It's government for the people, by the people, and of the people. And we have, because there has been a lack of civics and government education in our school system, people have stepped away from that. And unless you've been fortunate to be in a family or a atmosphere where you get that education, what has resulted is that people are not engaged with their government, don't even understand how government works. So when you talk about failing, our government is failing us. But we have to take responsibility as Americans, as being in this country, as a citizen, that we are part of that problem, because we failed to be engaged. We failed to step up and do beyond voting, or not even voting. So many of us are not voting because, my vote doesn't matter. And I'm not going to get into the cliche, because it has become a cliche. If your vote didn't matter, why are they trying to suppress it? We all know that. We're not stupid people. We're not stupid.
Yeah.
We know that. Okay, so that's the last time I'm going to say that, folks, because I'm not, that's become a cliche. But this is one reason government is failing, is we have not been engaged in government and helped government develop a plan.
Yeah.
Well, can I say our elected officials need to be trained too? Like Jamar was just talking about redistricting. I know a state representative who sat on the redistricting board and ended up drawn out of his own district, his or her own district, and had to send the maps back to committee. So we need to make sure we are training the people, or the people who are going to represent us have the right training and tools to do it right. And when we talk about the civic education, we also, November 3rd ain't going to be at the end of the 2020 election.
No, it's not.
We don't know how long this is going to go. And our folks need to know, what do you do if you're forced to vote with a provisional ballot? How do you make sure your vote and your ballot is counted and you validate your votes. And what is the process of the recount, and how does that impact our voting participation, our communities, and how can we impact that part of the electoral process?
Yeah. I just want to add
That's
three things. I want to
Go
add
ahead, Jamar.
what you were just saying because I agree with you. We're going to throw this "my vote don't count" into the fire because I don't want to hear ever again after this cycle anybody say that their vote don't count because if anything about the last 4 years shows you about voting mattering and elections being consequences, we have seen it plain and simple. One, what Brandon was saying about training elected officials, if you go to repower.org, we have a progressive governance academy. I have an answer for that. So, like, Elizabeth Warren says, I have a plan for that. So my job is I have a training for that. So, so look us up on repower.org because we have a whole academy, and our director is based in the Atlanta area. And she literally just does trainings across the country for elected officials, and we do them all year. And so if you know elected officials who want to get trained on policy and policy development and how that's connected to their communities, we do that training work as well. The second thing I think that's also very important is, democracy is what we make it, to your point, Marilyn, right? That when people say my vote doesn't matter, then does democracy matter? Does government matter? What they do, does that matter when you say that your vote doesn't count? The government and democracy runs how we choose to show up in it. And voting is one key, right? And I don't want to say that voting will solve everything. There's advocacy and other things involved. And the third thing is I just shared on a panel on Thursday, I believe, afternoon, and I shared with a group of Black professors at University of Texas. And I said, the bottom line of everything that we know in politics is that politics is connected to power. And you get to decide what you do with your power. And we got to start looking at our government as like a nonprofit board. I think I've shared this with y'all on this program before, right? That the elected officials that we elect, they're the executive director. But as the voters, we're the board of directors. And every year or every 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, whenever the term is, we are doing a performance review. And we're assessing their performance and we're assessing our community and where our communities are to decide, are we okay with this direction? We might reelect you. If we're not okay, then we need to find somebody else to run and be able to replace you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the politics is connected to power. And when we don't vote, we are giving away our power. We are failing ourselves when we choose not to vote because we are allowing a system to continue to be perpetuated that will skirt over all of our heads when we choose not to participate. Because decisions are being made for all three of us and our families and people who are watching right now as we speak, whether we show up or not. And decisions don't stop because we don't vote. How those decisions come about may make a difference of how we vote, but decisions don't stop. And so if we don't vote, those decisions are still being made, and it could negatively impact us as we've seen over decades.
That's right. Very true. There is a meme, I'm going to paraphrase it, that's out there that is saying, don't vote because you want to love the person. Vote because this is a chess move that you're making to get the government that you want. And that's very true, Jamar. And what you just said also, um, okay. All right. Yeah, I saw that remark. But that's very true. We're making a chess move by voting. And I totally understand, Jamal, what you were saying. I come from the business perspective of it's like a job interview. When someone is running, you go and you submit your resume and you go into a job interview, you're going to decide if you want to hire that person. You hire them, and if they don't work out, what do? You fire them. And that's what we're facing right now on the presidential level all the way down. We have a choice. We're the boss. They report to us. They are public servants, and all too often our elected officials, we forget that. And before I go to the next topic, because this is a show that's going by fast, it's so good, y'all. I want to remind everyone that you are watching A Gathering Place, hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, and we look forward to some more information from Brandon Upson and Jamarr Brown. So y'all, let's jump on to this, and I want to make sure we really do talk about this narrative that I'm hearing out there. The disconnect with Black male voters. I want to really dive into that because I want to see if we can address this before November 3rd. We're past voter registration for November 3rd, but getting Black males out to vote. Why are they not voting? I want to know, as a Black female who votes, and I don't even think about it. And I know I'm someone, I'm beyond voting. I'm involved with campaigns, etc. now. lead organizer for our coordinated campaign here in my county. And just I do the business of politics. Okay, I'm in politics. But what is the disconnect? I really want to understand it so I can be part of the solution. So we'll start with Brandon because of Amplify Action and your goal. Give me some knowledge, Brandon. I really need it.
Well, it's all about trust. It's all about trust. I literally had a conversation with a black male in his 50s who is a successful business owner between North Carolina and South Carolina. He has about a dozen different businesses across the two states. And he shared with me that he does not vote because of what his cousin went through trying to vote, right? So he saw firsthand the disenfranchisement of a member of his family. And at that point, he made up in his mind that the whole system is rigged, is not going to work, and they've already made up their minds who is going to be elected. And there are multiple stories about these things happening that sow the seeds of distrust within Black men about the voting process. Now, also, we have to look at what I said earlier about these last minute Hail Mary investments into our communities. Not only are these last minute investments happening, but then there's a extreme sense of urgency and even desperation when people come to your door and say, hey, you got to vote. If you don't vote, this person's going to lose. But if you do, they'll win or whatever, right? And then after election day, that thing didn't come to pass. So now it becomes deeper than just losing an election. Now you start to even lose trust in the people that you trusted and did something out of the ordinary that you normally wouldn't have done on their word. So when we talk about Black men not participating, this thing is deep and multi-layered. And the impact of us as campaigns, political organizations, and all other entities, when we put the election above the relationship that we have with folks in our community, it impacts the long-term health of our community's participation in the elections and the accountability of phases of government as well. So that's what we're doing.
Jamar, I know you want to say something. I want to throw this in very quickly before you make your remarks, and then Brandon can come back to it. Has a Black female? I'm glad you mentioned, Brandon, that it's deep and complex and nuanced and multi-layered. Because as a Black female, when I hear about being disappointed and seeing the disenfranchisement, we have also gone through that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is the difference, though, between the Black females who have kept coming back to that table and voting, and now we have a Black vice presidential candidate because, well, we actually had a President Barack Obama because of Black females.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have a vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, Black female, because we held them accountable. We woke up and realized the power of our vote. We got you here, Joe Biden. So now, we held him accountable. Now we want a vice presidential Black female. Because you got our vote, we came through for you, and we held them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, because there was a little rumbling before Kamala was announced that, you kind of downplaying our desire for that vice presidential candidate. So what I came back with and what others came back with, not only do we want the vice presidential candidate, we want a Supreme Court justice too.
Mm-hmm.
You don't play with us. We've been here for you. Now we're holding you accountable. Now the check has come due in that sense. That's one check that has come due. So we not only want the vice presidential candidate, we want the Supreme Court justice nominee also. So I say that to say, but we had to stay in there at the table for that battle. Right. What is the difference?
And so
that's not connecting with Black males. Go ahead.
So I had a conversation in Memphis with a guy who said, yes, we had President Obama, but he was black. He was not, a American descendant of slaves, right? Now we have Kamala Harris, who's black, but she's also not an American descendant of slaves, right? And what we got with Obama, he did not turn the tides for me and my family in my community. And there were a lot of promises that were unkept at the end of the day. He even went as far as to say, even when you look at the affordable health care, he's like, that's for middle class white people. That was his ploy to get reelected so that white folks would vote for him, because they're the ones more largely impacted by the healthcare industry than we are when it comes to health insurance. So it comes again back to trust. It's like in relationships when a man cheats and he's taken back multiple times, but as soon as she cheats one time, it's all over. The world is done. Like, but it's the only thing I can
Go ahead. Go ahead.
it is that breach of trust with the black man, especially the ones, and I'm only talking about from my own personal experience and the conversations that I'm having. It is much deeper. Once we're cut by that, it's hard to rebuild that breach again. And that's what we're working on, is to try to develop over a long term that trust in the process through education and continued engagement.
I'm gonna let Jamar. I hear you, Brandon, but I'm gonna come back because that's my role. I'm gonna push this because I'm really, really trying to understand. But I'm gonna let Jamar have his say because he's been waiting patiently. I don't know. I don't know. He's been waiting patiently, but he's been waiting. Go ahead, Jamar, because look, hey, I got to change positions. I'm ready.
I will oblige you both, and let's take this a little deeper.
Okay.
I don't think that we really have these conversations.
Well, we have to have this conversation.
No, absolutely, because there's a lot of division in our community. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And when black people are divided, that is re-perpetuating white supremacy too.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be mindful when we talk about black women, black men, this and that, and this type of black person and that type of black person. When we start dividing and conquering our own community, we are enhancing white supremacy on our own. And that's what we don't want to do. And so
don't make me start shouting, Jamar. I said, don't make me start shouting.
Oh, okay. It is Sunday. So what I wanted to share from the very first question, if I may, I know I'm stepping us back just a little bit about why black men, and Brandon was talking about how it's deep and complex. Let's talk about the systemic piece, especially, and I'm going to use voting. For me, how I look at it, right, you all know that we operate in a two-party system, right? So it's Democrats and Republicans. And I'm a DNC member, and I'm going to say it. Both parties have failed black people systemically. And so when you only have a choice in a lot of cases between a Republican and a Democrat, and when both have failed you, you typically think that you don't have a place there, right? Because we know that in history, ultimately in history, right, leading up to the 1960s, it was mostly Democrats who were trying to keep black people in a white supremacist system, right? And so we've got to know our history. These Dixiecrats who didn't want black people to be free, who still wanted segregation of schools and segregation of restaurants and things of that nature. It was the Republicans where most black people aligned before. And then in the 1960s, when Lyndon Johnson was president, and of course he was forced in some of these things, when they passed the Civil Rights Act, when they passed the Voting Rights Act that gave black people access to a little piece of power, then you saw a flip, right? And so you saw Republicans and Dixiecrats and Democrats switching to Republicans because they were trying to maintain those previous systems. And so what you've seen then over that time from the 1960s is the 80s, you had the war on drugs. Who was going to jail? Black people. In the 90s, you did have the crime bill. We got to own it. Who was going to jail? Black men. In the 80s, black men. And so they literally put us in jail. And when you are in jail in most states, as you know, when you go to jail, for example, you don't get to vote. And so what we also saw was a systemic decrease in our numbers. And then you see a two-party system where we see that both have failed us when we talk about the economics, when we talk about education. So to your point earlier, Marilyn, when you say what's the difference between black men and black women? Well, our black men were going to jail. Black women had to persevere. They still had to run the household. They still had to run the community meetings. And they had to do those things. And through that, they built the tenacity and the perseverance. And that's what we're seeing now when you had those Black women in Alabama turn out for Doug Jones. And they flipped that seat from racist Jeff Sessions to Doug Jones. Or that's where you see now that you were demanding for, Kamala Harris or Supreme Court justice or cabinet secretaries. That's where you had Stacey Abrams, who nearly won the governorship. Let's just call it. And so, today, there are those systemic issues that took Black men out of the system and together. And so I think that, to me, that's a little piece of it. That's not all of it. And I think that's something that's a little bit different along with our two-party system. So that's how I look at it. And some of how those parties have shown up. And when you only have a choice between one or two and both have failed you, then what are you supposed to do? And so I think what we're trying to do now, and I'll use the DNC as an example, is there was a multi-year investment in a program called Chop It Up. And y'all know Antoine C. Wright and some other folks from South Carolina are actually involved in that program, where they would have gone across the country, literally, but the pandemic. But that's going into the barbershops. That's going to talk to those brothers. That's what Amplify is doing. That's what Vision Walkers is doing. Black Men's PAC, Collective PAC, that's what people are doing now, is saying, these systems have failed us. We're going to create our own, and then we're going to engage our people in our own system. Right. And so when we find more Black people running for office, that's the Collective PAC. When we find more Black people voting, that's people like Brandon and Rashad and Jason and Craig Conway. I can name all the names. That's those new people. And so if we rebuild our own system and build our own and then bring our people in, we have a better chance of yielding some of those political and systemic outcomes. Marilyn, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did want to say something, Jamarr, and actually what you said. So you gave me a moment of clarity. Thank you very much, you and Brandon. And I want to bring in, I don't know if everybody can see this, but we see you, Aaron Bush. This was posted on Brandon's comment page. Platinum Plan includes Black land ownership and farming initiative. Let's grow hemp. So let me tie this to what Jamarr just said and Brandon just said. And Jamarr, our ownership and what we create. The Gullah-Geechee Chamber of Commerce, we have already hosted workshops on how to grow hemp. We have a partnership with one of our members, Jermaine Yulin, who is the first African-American in South Carolina to be licensed to grow hemp. These are things that we are already doing. And see, this is the issue I have with someone like Ice Cube. Y'all. I'm showing my age. Okay, and I think he's around my age, but yeah, I'm showing my age. Ice Cube hopping up 2 weeks before an election and say, I have this plan, I'll work with anyone. Well, first of all, the Democrats, let's be honest, I'm with you, Jamarr and Brandon, that both parties have failed us. But let's be also clear that the Democratic Party has put a plan out there.
Absolutely.
Prior to this. They got a plan out there, all right? The Republicans went into a convention where they didn't even have a platform coming out of that convention and policies and stuff. And they have a president that's very transactional. So let's think of the most ghetto Black term that we could think of, platinum plan at the club, and put it out there and say, we helping Black folks. And Ice Cube tied into that and came up with his plan. So I'll acknowledge that, okay, nice effort, Ice Cube. The problem I have is we have groups such as my group who are already out here doing the work. We already have, when we talk about Black land ownership, you got the Heirs Property Center for Heirs Property Preservation. That's Black run, and it's mostly for Black people dealing with heirs property. There are already organizations out here doing the work. There are already organizations out here who have plans and are executing those plans, who have strategy and who are executing these strategies. What disturbs me is when we have the Johnny-come-latelys who come up with, I got this grand plan. The problem I have with that is, did you talk with Miss Mabel, who's been out here in the grassroots putting her plan together and working? Did you go to training for voter protection? Did you go to training on poll manager? And I don't care if you're a celebrity or whatever. Were you in the grassroots getting the information, getting the knowledge, looking at the people who are doing the work, who've already been doing the work, and working with them to come up with this grand plan? Or are you just going to sit at the table with somebody and hope that I don't know what you're hoping for? Because their entire pattern has shown you that they're not going to be held accountable, and it's very transactional. Let me throw this plan out because I'm hoping just to peel off just enough votes so that I can win. I'm not gonna make this happen. I've told you through my actions, I'm not going to make this happen.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the problem I have with someone like an Ice Cube or someone. Aaron, love you. Thank you for
Yeah.
posting this, because it gives us a chance to have this conversation. This stuff is already happening. Already happening. What we need you to do is look around you in our own community and recognize who's doing the work.
Yeah.
And go and get educated. What you just said, Jamar, what you said, Brett, it really does come down to education. And what we are confused about is the difference between schooling and education.
Come on.
Schooling is what you get in K through 12.
Mhm.
Education can be done by anybody.
Absolutely.
Brandon is an educator. Jamar is an educator. Marilyn Hemingway is an educator. Education, bless my late mother, told me, even when I finished college told me, always continue your education. Even if it's a community workshop, a webinar. Well, it wasn't webinar at that time. Community classes, go back to school, whatever, continue your education. I cannot tell you how many workshops and stuff, even last night at the event I attended, I moderated a panel about sustainable farming, local food movement, and then they showed the movie called Sustainable. That's educational, but it was also entertainment. Would have been a good date night, to be quite honest with you, out in a Black River Cypress Preserve, beautiful setting out in the woods, beautiful park like setting, but it was education. So I can now take that information and have a more intelligent discussion about sustainable farming, regenerative farming, and how it can be utilized in the Black community. And it's already happening. We got people doing community gardens, but we need to look around and see what is happening in our community right now, instead of hoping this celebrity comes along and has a possible seat at the table with a president that has been lying to us for the last 4 years, 2 weeks before an election. That's where I have the problem. It's not sustainable. That in and of itself is not sustainable. It's a distraction. It's just, we playing games, folks. We playing checkers when we need to be playing chess. And that's all I had to say about that.
Well,
You got to add anything to that, Jamal?
I would like to add something really quickly, because one of the things that what I've seen, and this is both parties, but one of the things I've seen is, why does the Black Plan have to have some kind of name to it? I don't, I maybe it's something I don't know. Somebody might be able to educate me, but when you say like the Platinum Plan, when that's nothing but the highest form of cultural appropriation to me, at least. And I don't think that the plan, the come to Jesus and help us Lord plan. I mean, we don't need all that, right?
Mhm.
So I think some of that we have to, really be thinking about. So I think to your point earlier, when you say the Platinum Plan, and then two, we have to also make sure that our Black Plan, whatever it's called, that is not, like you said, it's something transactional. Because one of the things is, I'll use criminal justice, right? This plan is more on the economy, but when we talk about criminal justice, they had the First Step Act that released a few Black folks, but it's not like this overwhelming.
It didn't change the system.
That we need to. It didn't change the system to where we need to go run vote for this person because they saved us from something, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
we've got to also not get caught up sometimes with some of these plans that we're offered the crumbs, because how many plans over the history of this country have we seen that's supposed to help Black people? And that goes back to what Brandon was saying, earlier about trust, right? And really being able to do that. The other thing that I'll add is, around the celebrity, I'm all for celebrities being social justice advocates. You have something I don't have. You have millions of followers. You have millions of dollars, right? But like you said, what can some of these celebrities start looking at the community development corporations and maybe donate to those, right? Because like you said, there are people that are already doing this work. We don't need to duplicate the work for our community. We need to be enhancing what's already going on and how, folks have gotten that education, really to be able to look at, some of those particular issues. And then the last thing I'll say is, Joe Biden put out a plan, the Lift Every Voice plan, another name, that's directed toward Black Americans. But, that was months ago. We've had months to debate that plan. We've had to really go through and really be able to say, we like this, we don't like this needs to be enhanced. You don't have this at all. We need to add this. And then you come 2 weeks before an election when people have already voted. I mean, let's be honest. right? Like that, I think a couple days ago it was like 23 million people.
Yeah.
So 3
Yeah.
million people don't have a chance to now make a decision based on a plan, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
that's also, I won't go as far as to say voter suppression, but it does lack, it doesn't give voters the full engagement because
Mhm.
somebody already felt like they probably already made some kind of informed decision. And then when you come out with a plan 2 weeks before the election, that's information I could have had that may have swayed my vote one way or the other.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
And so there's a lack of information now that's out there to get the last few votes. And so
And
now
that
you're
speaks to his inexperience when it comes to politics.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
He would have known I should have done this 2 years
Years,
ago.
2 years ago when they
Yeah.
were announcing,
Mhm.
when they
Mhm.
were announcing that they were running, that's when you come up and say, no, we need to sit down and have a conversation before this gets too far along. 23
Mhm.
million people don't have a chance to switch their vote because if 23 million people like the plan, they can't even say they like it, right?
That's right.
You've actually taken away an opportunity from voters when we are trying to give everybody as much information and as much power as possible to go make informed decisions.
And can I share just a quick story? One of my most embarrassing experiences was my first time going to the Potomac Coalition meeting in Delaware and really getting a chance to sit down and talk to Quentin James, who he and his wife started the Collective PAC. And I had this brilliant idea from my years of working in electoral politics that we needed to make sure we trained, recruited, and placed Black talent on in key positions on these major electoral campaigns. So I'm that whole time I'm there for the full weekend. I'm telling Quentin, I got this great idea. This is what we need to do. I'm telling the other board members, this is definitely what we need to do, and I'm looking to get some support so we can make this happen and possibly even start an initiative or an organization to recruit, train, and deploy Black talent on electoral campaigns and policy campaigns. So then afterwards, and Quentin entertained me. He was gracious and great, and I've had a couple of conversations with him after that event. And then I told another friend, and she sent me an email with a link to the organization that Quentin, his wife, and their friends started years before my idea to do the exact same thing. And they had been doing it for at least 3 years at the time. So everybody got good ideas, but everyone's not going to do a Google search to see if that idea has already been brought into fruition to see how we can add to it being more successful. And I think Ice Cube got caught in the same thing I got caught in. He didn't do a Google search to see what else was out there. He didn't reach out to people who might know more than he about this particular topic, but he had a great idea. He knew he had a platform, and he started using it and opening up his mouth before he did his due diligence. And I'm not going to fault him for it, but I think there is time for a course correction because at this point in time, like you said earlier, Marilyn, we got to stay focused. We can't look at the shiny new object or the birdie. Right now, we got to keep our eyes on the prize, and that is on November 3rd, making sure we get out and vote. And then we can handle this other stuff later because it is absolutely too late to start talking about anything else other than getting as many of our community members out to vote as possible.
Very true. And Brandon, glad you brought that up. Focusing on it. I think we talked about the focus before we started the show. So folks, we're gonna tell y'all right now. Y'all need to focus on voting.
Focus.
Okay, not the shiny object. But I'm glad you brought that up. And from the economic point of view, Brandon, the same thing has happened with me with the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. I knew when I started that would be my lane. Economics and bringing the cultural part, the political part, but I have stayed focused on that lane. And the reason I learned that is I went and took a class. Going back again, that education. And in that class, one of the things I learned is there is actually nothing new under the sun. What is new is your spin on that object or that vision you may have. Because it's new because you bring in your own experiences, you bring in what you were nurtured to learn. All right, and that makes it new, maybe new and improved, new and whatever. But there's really nothing, quote unquote, new under the sun. And if we all understood that, then we would take the time to do our due diligence and get educated, then say, maybe, look, Amplify Action is over there. So Ice Cube, if you are listening and this is the work that they're doing, Ice Cube, you need to make a donation to Amplify Action.
Amen.
Ampirevote.com, y'all. Well, all right, now make a donation. Okay, y'all see how I slid that in there? All right, or you go to repower.org where Jamarr is and all of their training and what they're doing, and you make a donation to them, and you also get involved with both organizations. And if you want to do an economic thing, then you look at all these Black Chamber of Commerces out here, or the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, and say, what are their plans? What are they doing? Because I can guarantee you that there are people in the Black community doing the work, but the one thing that we miss is that investment.
Right.
And we live in a capitalistic society, so the investment that I'm talking about right now is that cold hard cash. Every Black business, too many of us, more than 90%, literally do not have the funding to grow and expand, hire more people, and be sustainable within our community. So it's an investment of cold hard cash, but it's also an investment of education. You got to get knowledgeable. You got to do your due diligence before you step out there and get exposed. And that was the thing with Ice Cube. I don't want to end on Ice Cube because I mean, I respect the brother for what he attempted to do, but it's a distraction. And I'm glad you brought that up, Brandon, that we have got to be focused right now on voting before and on November 3rd. That is our focus, people. Just focus, people. Focus. All right. But after, beyond the vote, is what we were talking about mostly today. So we're going to end this in the next 2 minutes with Jamarr and Brandon wrapping up, because I know they're busy. We all busy, and we usually stick to an hour. So Jamarr, politics and beyond politics. Give us a few words and wrap it up, then we'll kick it to Brandon to wrap it up. Jamarr.
Sure. I mean, I'm like you. I mean, I give Ice Cube credit. I think execution might not have been the best, but I think it will stir a conversation, I think, after the election. But like I said, it's very hard to have a conversation about a plan when people have already started voting, right? It's very hard to shift that right now. And I think the timing was just off. But I hope that we will continue to have these conversations, especially about the economic stability of the Black community, because that's something we need to be continuing to talk about. But, as, we're closing here, of course, we always remind folks to, make sure that you are going to vote, that you are showing up. But, one of the things that, I will share, at least in my opinion, is that I think that this is one of the most consequential elections in our modern history. Who we elect and don't elect can really say a lot about our politics and say a lot about who we are as a country and who we are as a democracy. And everything we know and we believe is on the line. I mean, human rights, civil rights, the economy, healthcare, education, the environment. I mean, you name it. Political representation when it comes down to redistricting. All of that is on the line in this election. And so I don't want you just to go vote and go home. I want you to vote, to study the candidates, but to vote up and down the ballot. In Texas, they outlawed straight party voting. So we don't have straight party voting. We literally had to really educate our voters here in our community about who the candidates are, and that name recognition is going to be important. And we have everything on the ballot this year in Texas, at least. We have obviously president, vice president, U.S. Senate, congressional, state house, state Senate, county commissioners. We have judges, we have district attorneys, we have county attorneys, we have school board members. We have a railroad commissioner who actually negotiates our gas prices and what that looks like. We have Supreme Court. We elect our Supreme Court in Texas. And so we have Supreme Court justices. We have Court of Appeals judges. We have civil court judges. We have criminal court judges, that are all on the ballot. And so city council, you name it. South Carolina, there's so many on the ballot, especially U.S. Senate, when it comes right now to, for example, this U.S. Senate, Supreme Court justice. So make sure that you understand how the local, state, and federal government all work together. and that it is a team that you are voting for. And who, from bottom to top, who you want to be on your team, who you want to ride for you and for your community. That's what we're deciding on. And we're, as
Mhm.
the voters, are the decision makers who are putting in place the policy makers that we have to hold accountable. One more thing, and then I'll pass it to Brandon, is Brandon alluded to earlier, but this election isn't over November 3rd, right? We don't know
Mhm.
what's going to happen, right? Because there could be voting issues, things of that nature. But like I said earlier, accountability is not only for who we don't elect. Accountability is or who we don't vote for. Accountability is for everybody. If I vote for you, Joe Biden, I'm holding him accountable. Jamie, we hold him accountable. Democrats in Texas, for example, we have to hold these people accountable across the board. And so don't let, they take the oath of office, they send in newsletters, they have nice virtual parties. That's fine. But at the end of the day, in 6 months, what are you doing for me? What are you doing for my community? What are you doing for our district? And that's got to be the question. And we've got to be consistent about that over the next 4 years. And I think the last 4 years showed us that we can't let our hands off the wheel, that we are the drivers of the car. And it's up to us to make decisions. And one thing that we can do to help make those decisions is cast our votes. And so if you have not voted, I already voted. But if you have not voted, please, I encourage you to go and vote. But I also encourage you to continue being an advocate for your community.
Absolutely. And what Jamarr just talked about, he didn't just stop at the president and vice president of the United States, even the United States Senate. He went all the way down the list of local municipal elections that are on the ballot right now. Like in most places, you can go vote right now. So what I want to end this with is that we have to understand that our vote does count. It is counted. It is worth something. We said this earlier. If it wasn't worth something, why would people spend or forego millions, even billions of dollars to try to stop us from casting it? It is just that simple. Now, when we talk about these local elections, these are the most intimately important elections that we as a community can participate in. When you talk about soil and water commissioners, we have a soil and water commission in a part of South Carolina where some of those members have been letting folks know that there's land coming up, Black owned land that's coming up. So you should go over there and buy that real quick. A woman that I know just purchased about 300 acres of Black owned heirs property because she was tipped off by the Soil and Water Commission. There's city council members. When I was in college, they voted to stop allowing people to skateboard on certain streets and was giving out tickets. Anything that it happens in your daily life is impacted by an elected official. And if you are not adding your voice and your vote, you're allowing someone else to determine who's going to have that authority over you and your family. Now, here's the thing. We already know that there are some elected officials who have blatantly shown us that they don't believe that Black lives matter. But if
Mhm.
they matter to you, any of you who are watching this right now, you should go and vote and stop letting other people dictate our communities for us. Is that important? And I wanted to talk to Miss Glenda's son, who she just left a comment, because I'm just imploring all of us to work together to make sure that our youth are not dissuaded or pushed away from participating because of false and misinformation that their vote doesn't count and the system is already rigged against us. This is our best tool, better than any weapon that other weapon that we can think of. And the last thing I'll say is, we worked really hard on ampourvote.com to make it a true utility site, not just a website that we can use to raise money. So if you are out there and you need a ride to the polls, go to our website and you can get a ride to the polls no matter where you are. If you need to check on your absentee ballot or check on your voter registration status or where your polling location is, you can use our website to do just that. It's a utility site, not just a regular website. And I'm just excited about what we're going to do together on November 4th to hold the next administration accountable to what we as American citizens deserve, because our people, Black folks, deserve to be treated as first class citizens. Because if we're going to spend that first class money, we don't deserve to be treated as third class citizens. So thank you again for another great conversation, Marilyn. I can't wait.
I know.
The
For next month, after the election, ooh,
Yeah.
it's gonna be hot. Cause y'all know, y'all. I'm not gonna say much, but I do want to say this, cause we know it's not gonna be over November 3rd.
No.
So we need to be prepared. So that next third Sunday, we're gonna be hot, y'all, because y'all need to know this is not gonna be over, and we also need to know this. I will say for my people, it is going to be very dangerous between now and November 3rd, and it's going to be very dangerous between November 3rd and to whenever. And I'm telling you this not to scare you.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a warning, it's information. Because this is where our country is right now. We've had a governor, they threatened to kidnap her. We've had people taking guns into state capitals. I'm saying this because I love my community. I love my people. I love myself.
Yeah.
And there are going to be some hurt people out here. But we have to be prepared, and we would be remiss if we did not tell our folks that you need to take all safety measures and be smart about yourself and about your family and your friends. Because this is very serious, and it touches on what Jamarr and Brandon both said. This is about democracy as we know it. And if we don't win November 3rd, and when the final votes are counted, democracy will end as we know it, and we will not be able to hold anybody accountable. All right. So we have to be very much aware of our surroundings and our safety. And I do want to say that because Brandon and Jamar ended it with the words that we all needed to hear regarding the voting, politics beyond the politics of voting, but also being part of the government itself and being engaged. And that's what they have said and put out there. But I just want to make sure that we are all aware that we have to be mindful of our safety and take those measures to keep yourself safe. Also, that includes, I always have my props. I've been, wear your mask when you vote, take your hand sanitizer. But beyond that, there are people in this world who mean us harm. And it is up to us, because we're very smart people, that we do everything to lessen that harm upon our bodies and upon our community. So I just want to be very serious about that, Brandon and Jamar. Y'all, it's been good as always. Always enjoy this conversation, y'all. Catch us the next time on the third Sunday in November.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get a couple of days of rest between now and then. And we'll have, as usual on Wednesdays and Sundays at 4 o'clock is a gathering place hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. Jamar, Brandon, it's been real as always. I know we'll be talking between now and then, even if it's just, whatever we're going to be talking about. But go out there, continue doing the good work. Get these folks out to vote. That's what I'm doing. Right. And we're going to make this happen, folks. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Jamar.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.
Okay.
All right, have a good one.